Missing connections. Cassandra Wells fumbled with her camera bag, coffee cup, and train ticket as she sprinted up the concrete steps of Grand Central Station. The morning air bit at her cheeks, and her breath formed small clouds in the crisp October dawn. She could hear the rumble of the 6:15 a.m. express to Albany in the distance, and her heart sank as she realized she was still 2 platforms away. "Wait!" she called out uselessly, watching the silver train pull away from the platform like a metallic snake disappearing into the tunnel. Her sister's engagement party was in 4 hours, and she was the photographer. This was not how today was supposed to begin. Cassandra slumped onto a wooden bench, setting her equipment down with a frustrated sigh. The platform was nearly empty now, save for a few early commuters checking their phones and a maintenance worker sweeping cigarette butts. She pulled out her phone to check the next train schedule when a warm voice interrupted her thoughts. "Rough morning?" She looked up to find a man about her age standing nearby, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a charcoal wool coat that looked expensive but lived in. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the wind, and his green eyes held a mixture of sympathy and amusement. He had the kind of face that belonged in architectural magazines. Strong jawline, thoughtful expression, hands that looked like they created beautiful things. "The worst," Cassandra replied, managing a rueful smile. "I'm supposed to be at my sister's engagement party in Albany by 10, and that was the last express train for 2 hours." "Albany?" The stranger's eyebrows rose. "I was supposed to be on that train, too. Had a meeting that's now thoroughly ruined." He gestured to his own coffee cup. "I'm guessing we both stopped at Stella's Coffee and underestimated how long their quick service actually takes?" Despite her frustration, Cassandra laughed. "Guilty." I ordered what I thought was a simple latte, and somehow it became a 20-minute production involving 3 different baristas and a philosophical discussion about foam art. Mine was worse. I asked for black coffee, and the new guy spent 15 minutes explaining their 17 different bean origins while the express train literally left without me. He extended his hand. "I'm Damian Cross, fellow victim of artisanal coffee culture. Cassandra Wells, professional photographer and apparently amateur time manager." His handshake was firm, warm, and lasted just a moment longer than necessary. Damian sat down beside her on the bench, leaving a respectful distance but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and woodsy. "So, sister's engagement party? That sounds important. I'm the photographer. She specifically requested me instead of hiring someone professional because, and I quote, 'I want someone who understands what love looks like.'" Cassandra shook her head. "Now I'm going to arrive looking frazzled and probably miss half the good shots." "What kind of photography do you do?" Damian asked, and something in his tone suggested genuine interest rather than polite conversation. "Travel mostly. I spend about 8 months a year documenting different cultures, landscapes, hidden places that most people never see." She gestured to her camera bag. "It's amazing work, but it makes maintaining relationships challenging." Damian nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. I'm an architect, and I spend most of my time designing buildings for other people's dreams while my own life feels like it's built on someone else's foundation." There was something melancholy in his voice that made Cassandra study his face more carefully. Despite his expensive clothes and confident demeanor, there was a sadness in his eyes that she recognized. The look of someone living a life that didn't quite fit. "That sounds lonely," she said softly. "It is." He met her gaze directly. "But maybe that's about to change." They talked for the next hour and a half, sharing stories about missed opportunities and dreams deferred. Damian told her about his vision for sustainable architecture that merged with natural landscapes. Cassandra described her upcoming assignment in Iceland, photographing the northern lights for National Geographic. The conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years, punctuated by comfortable silences and shared laughter. When the 8:30 train finally arrived, Cassandra felt a strange reluctance to leave. They exchanged numbers as she gathered her bags, and Damian helped her carry her equipment to the train car. "I have something important tonight," he said, standing on the platform as she settled into her window seat. "But I'd like to call you tomorrow if that's okay." "I'd like that very much," Cassandra replied, pressing her hand against the window glass. As the train pulled away, she watched Damien grow smaller on the platform and felt like she was leaving something precious behind. She had no idea that in 12 hours she would see him again, walking down an aisle toward another woman, speaking vows that would change everything between them before their story had even begun. The train carried her toward Albany, toward her sister's happiness, and away from a connection that felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. Outside the window, the Hudson Valley blurred past in shades of gold and amber, beautiful but impermanent, like the morning that had just changed her life in ways she couldn't yet understand. The Riverside Manor buzzed with elegant chaos as Cassandra adjusted her camera settings, capturing candid moments of her sister Elena's engagement party. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests in cocktail attire, and the scent of white roses and champagne filled the air. Elena radiated joy in her emerald green dress, constantly showing off her vintage diamond ring to anyone within arm's reach. "Cassie, you're getting some beautiful shots," Elena said, appearing at her side with 2 champagne flutes. "I'm so glad you made it, even if you did arrive looking like you'd been running through a windstorm." Cassandra accepted the champagne gratefully. "Sorry about that. Train delays. You know how it is." She didn't mention Damien, though his face had been drifting through her thoughts all afternoon. There was something about their conversation that felt unfinished, like the first chapter of a book she desperately wanted to keep reading. "The venue coordinator mentioned there's a wedding ceremony happening in the main ballroom tonight," Elena continued, gesturing toward the manor's east wing. "Some big society wedding?" The bride's family apparently booked the entire property for the weekend. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Cassandra could see guests in formal attire walking across the manicured gardens toward an ornate ballroom. Women in designer gowns and men in black tie moved like elegant shadows in the gathering dusk. White roses and baby's breath decorated every surface, and strings of lights transformed the ballroom into something from a fairy tale. "Looks expensive," Cassandra observed, raising her camera to capture Elena dancing with their father. "The bride is Victoria Sterling, you know, the Sterling Hotel Empire, and the groom is some hotshot architect. Apparently it's been the wedding of the season according to the society pages." Cassandra's finger paused on the camera's shutter release. An architect. Her heart began to beat faster, though she told herself it was ridiculous. New York was full of architects. It couldn't possibly be. "I'm going to step outside for some fresh air," she told Elena, suddenly feeling like the room was too warm, too crowded. The October evening was crisp and clear, with the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Cassandra walked along the stone pathway that bordered both venues, drawn by a curiosity she couldn't quite name. The wedding ceremony was beginning, and she could hear the soft strains of a string quartet floating through the open ballroom doors. She positioned herself behind a large oak tree where she could see into the ballroom without being noticed. Guests filled elegant white chairs arranged in perfect rows, all facing an altar decorated with cascading white flowers. The bride appeared first, walking down the aisle in a stunning Vera Wang gown. Her blonde hair swept into an intricate updo topped with a diamond tiara. Victoria Sterling was breathtakingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that graced magazine covers and launched 1,000 social media followers. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world, her smile radiant as she acknowledged guests with subtle nods. Then the groom turned to face his bride, and Cassandra's world tilted on its axis. Damien, the man she had spent the morning talking with, laughing with, feeling connected to in ways she hadn't experienced in years, was standing at that altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His dark hair was now styled impeccably, and his green eyes were focused on the woman walking toward him. But even from her hidden vantage point, Cassandra could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set, as if he were bracing himself for something difficult. She watched in stunned silence as Victoria reached the altar, as Damien took her hands, as the officiant began speaking about love and commitment and forever. The words felt like they were coming from underwater, distorted and strange. This morning, Damien had talked about living on someone else's foundation. Now she understood what he meant. Do you, Damien Cross, take Victoria Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part. Cassandra held her breath. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Damien hesitated. His eyes swept over the assembled guests, and she thought, or maybe hoped, that he was looking for someone. Looking for her. I do, he said finally, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. The words hit Cassandra like a physical blow. She stepped back from the tree, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck. Of course he was getting married. Men like Damien Cross, successful, handsome, from good families, didn't stay single. The connection she'd felt, the spark between them, had been real for her, but perhaps just pleasant conversation for him. As the ceremony continued, Cassandra caught fragments of conversations from wedding guests who had stepped outside for air. Such a beautiful merger of two powerful families, one woman was saying. Victoria's father is thrilled. The Sterling hotels will benefit enormously from the Cross family's real estate holdings, another replied. I heard the groom's father practically arranged the whole thing. Smart business move, marrying into the Sterling empire. Though I must say, the groom looked rather grim for someone supposedly marrying for love. Cassandra felt sick. Not because Damien was married, but because of how he was married. This wasn't the love story Elena was celebrating inside. This was something else entirely. A transaction, a merger, a union built on expectations and family obligations rather than genuine feeling. She remembered his words from the morning. I spend most of my time designing buildings for other people's dreams while my own life feels like it's built on someone else's foundation. Now she understood. Damien wasn't just designing buildings for others. He was living an entire life constructed by other people's expectations. The ceremony concluded with applause and the traditional kiss. Even from a distance, Cassandra could see that it was perfunctory, polite rather than passionate. As the wedding party began to process back down the aisle, she quickly retreated to Elena's party, her mind reeling. There you are, Elena called as Cassandra slipped back inside. You missed Dad's toast. Are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine, Cassandra lied, forcing herself to smile. Just tired from the early morning, but she wasn't fine. She spent the rest of the evening mechanically taking photographs, her professional instincts carrying her through while her mind processed what she had witnessed. Every time she looked at Elena and her fiancé Thomas, genuinely in love, giddy with happiness, planning a future they both wanted, she thought about Damien and Victoria, bound together by obligation rather than choice. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Cassandra packed her equipment with heavy hands. She had come here expecting to document her sister's joy and instead had discovered that the man who had made her believe in unexpected connections was trapped in a life that wasn't really his own. Her phone buzzed with a text message. For a wild moment, she hoped it might be Damien, but it was just her assistant confirming details for next week's shoot in Colorado. Walking to her car under the starlit sky, Cassandra couldn't shake the image of Damien's face at the altar, handsome, composed, and utterly resigned. She had photographed enough weddings to recognize the difference between a groom marrying the love of his life and a groom fulfilling an obligation. Tonight, she had watched a good man sacrifice his happiness for duty, and it broke her heart in ways she didn't yet fully understand. 6 months later, Cassandra stood knee-deep in the turquoise waters of the Caribbean Sea, her underwater camera housing glinting in the late afternoon sun. The Coral Bay Resort in Belize stretched behind her like a modernist dream, all clean lines and sustainable materials that seemed to grow organically from the pristine coastline. She was 3 days into a 2-week assignment photographing luxury eco-resorts for Condé Nast Traveler, and the work was exactly the kind of challenge she thrived on. The resort's commitment to environmental preservation made for compelling visuals, Solar panels disguised as artistic installations, buildings elevated to protect coral reef systems, and guest villas that seemed to float above the jungle canopy without disturbing the ecosystem below. Cassandra had spent the morning capturing the interplay of architecture and nature, but now she was focused on the underwater world that made this location truly special. Through her camera's viewfinder, she watched schools of tropical fish weave between coral formations in a ballet of color and movement. The afternoon light filtered down through the crystal-clear water in cathedral-like beams, and she knew she was getting shots that would make editors weep with joy. "Excuse me, are you the photographer?" Cassandra surfaced, pushing her mask up onto her forehead and turning toward the voice. A woman stood on the resort's private dock wearing a designer cover-up over what was obviously an expensive bikini. She was blonde, perfectly tanned, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "Yes, I'm Cassandra Wells. Are you with resort management?" "Oh no, I'm a guest." "Victoria Cross." The woman extended a manicured hand. "I just wanted to say your work is incredible. I saw you photographing the sunrise from our balcony this morning, and the dedication was impressive. Victoria Cross. The name hit Cassandra like a wave, and she had to grip the dock's ladder to steady herself. This was Damien's wife, the woman she had watched him marry 6 months ago in that fairy tale ballroom. Up close, Victoria was even more beautiful than she had appeared from a distance. But there was something brittle in her smile, a tension around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Thank you," Cassandra managed, pulling herself up onto the dock. "Are you here on vacation?" "Honeymoon, actually, though a rather delayed one." Victoria's laugh had a sharp edge. "My husband's business kept us in New York longer than expected. You know how men are about their work." As if summoned by her words, Damien appeared on the path leading from the main resort. He wore simple khaki shorts and a white linen shirt, looking more relaxed than Cassandra had ever seen him, though his smile seemed forced as he approached his wife. "Victoria, there you are. I was looking for—" His words died as his eyes met Cassandra's. For a moment, the air between them crackled with recognition and something deeper, more dangerous. "Damien, this is Cassandra Wells, the photographer. I was just admiring her dedication to her craft." Victoria's voice carried a subtle warning. Though whether she sensed the tension or was simply being territorial, Cassandra couldn't tell. "Miss Wells," Damien said carefully, extending his hand. His touch was brief, professional, but Cassandra felt the slight tremor in his fingers. "Your work must be fascinating." "It has its moments," she replied, hyper-aware of Victoria watching them both. "I should let you two enjoy your honeymoon. The sunset from the North Beach is supposed to be spectacular tonight. Actually, that's where we were headed," Victoria said, linking her arm possessively through Damien's. "Couples massage on the beach. Champagne, the whole romantic package." Cassandra nodded, gathering her equipment. "Well, have a wonderful evening." She spent the next hour in her room, ostensibly reviewing the day's shots, but actually trying to process the shock of seeing Damien again. He looked the same, those intelligent green eyes, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. But there was something dimmed about him, as if he were a beautifully crafted lamp with the bulb turned down low. As the sun began to set, Cassandra found herself walking toward the North Beach despite her better judgment. She told herself she was just scouting locations for tomorrow's shoot, but deep down she knew she was hoping for another glimpse of the man who had occupied her. Thoughts for 6 months. The beach was deserted except for 2 figures in the distance, a massage table set up on the sand, champagne bucket glinting in the golden light. But as Cassandra approached, she realized only one person was on the table. Victoria lay face down, apparently asleep, while a masseuse worked quietly. Damien was nowhere to be seen. Cassandra continued walking, drawn by the beauty of the setting sun painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. She rounded a rocky outcropping and found a small, secluded cove where the resort's lights couldn't reach. The water here was calm as glass, reflecting the sky like a mirror. "I was hoping I'd find you here." She turned to find Damien standing at the edge of the tree line, still in his linen shirt but with his feet bare and his sleeves rolled up. In the fading light, he looked younger, less burdened than he had that morning at the train station so many months ago. "You shouldn't be here," Cassandra said, though she made no move to leave. "Neither should you." He walked closer, stopping just outside of arm's reach. "But I'm glad you are. I never got to call you." "You got married instead." "Yes." The word was simple, final, and full of regret. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The air between them hummed with unspoken words and careful distance. "Are you happy?" Cassandra asked finally. Damien's laugh was hollow. "That's a complicated question." "It shouldn't be. Victoria is a good person," he said, as if trying to convince himself. "She deserves better than a husband who married her for all the wrong reasons. And you deserve better than a marriage built on obligation." Damien moved closer, close enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. "Do you ever think about that morning? About what might have happened if I hadn't had something important that night?" "Every day," Cassandra whispered. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither should cross. The sun was almost gone now, painting everything in deep purple and gold. In this magical light, with the sound of gentle waves and the scent of tropical flowers in the air, the world felt suspended, separate from real life and consequences. "Cassandra," Damien said, her name a prayer on his lips. He reached for her then, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with heartbreaking tenderness. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as 6 months of longing crashed over her like a wave. When she opened them, he was looking at her with such intensity that she forgot to breathe. "I've thought about you every single day," he whispered. "Every morning when I wake up next to someone else. Every night when I'm designing buildings I don't care about. Every moment when I'm living a life that doesn't feel like mine." "Damien." He was leaning closer now, and she was rising to meet him. The space between them shrank to nothing, and she could feel his breath on her lips, could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. Time seemed to stop as they hovered on the edge of something that would change everything. "There you are," Victoria's voice cut through the twilight like a blade. They sprang apart as she appeared around the rocky outcropping, her cover-up billowing in the evening breeze. If she had seen how close they had been standing, she gave no sign of it. "The masseuse finished, and I couldn't find you anywhere," Victoria continued, reaching for Damien's hand. "I was starting to worry." "I just went for a walk," Damien said, his voice carefully neutral. "I ran into Ms. Wells photographing the sunset." "How lovely," Victoria replied, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, we should head back. We have dinner reservations at 8. As they walked away together, Victoria's hand firmly in Damien's, Cassandra remained alone on the beach. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving only the last traces of light reflected on the water. She stood there until full darkness fell, replaying those few moments when the world had narrowed to just the two of them. That night, she called her editor and requested an early departure. Some assignments were too dangerous to complete, and this was one of them. She had come to Belize to photograph paradise, but she had found something far more treacherous, a love that could destroy everything it touched. By morning, she would be gone, leaving Damien to his honeymoon and his obligations. But the memory of that almost kiss would follow her for months to come. A beautiful, terrible reminder of what might have been if the world were different. If duty didn't matter, if love could conquer everything instead of just breaking hearts. 1 year later, Cassandra stood in the sleek gallery space of the Morrison Building, adjusting the lighting on her latest photograph, a haunting image of the northern lights dancing over an Icelandic glacier. The exhibition, titled Untouched Worlds, featured her most acclaimed work from the past 18 months, hidden temples in Myanmar, untouched beaches in Madagascar, and the ethereal landscapes of the Arctic that had earned her a National Geographic cover story. "The spacing on this wall is perfect," said Marcus, her gallery coordinator, stepping back to admire the arrangement. "The way the light hits that glacier photo, it's like you captured pure magic." Cassandra smiled, though her attention was divided. Through the gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see into the building across the street, a modern architectural firm with the name Cross & Associates etched in elegant steel letters. She had discovered the connection purely by accident when booking the gallery space. And despite her better judgment, she hadn't changed venues. For 3 days, she had been setting up the exhibition while stealing glances at the building where Damien worked. She had seen him twice. Once getting coffee from the lobby cafe, once standing at a window on the 15th floor, looking out at the city with that same contemplative expression she remembered from their morning at the train station. "Cassie, you're not listening to me," Marcus said, waving a hand in front of her face. "I said the critic from Art Forum is here early. She wants to do the interview now." "Right. Sorry." Cassandra forced herself to focus on the evening ahead. This exhibition was a career milestone, featuring work that had taken her to 6 continents and earned her recognition as one of the premier travel photographers of her generation. She couldn't afford to be distracted by ghosts from her past. The opening reception began at 7, and by 7:30 the gallery was filled with art collectors, critics, and photography enthusiasts. Cassandra moved through the crowd in a black silk dress, discussing her work and fielding questions about her upcoming assignment in Antarctica. She was in the middle of explaining her lighting techniques for the Aurora Borealis series when she felt someone watching her. She turned and found Damien standing by her photograph of the Belize coral reef, the very resort where they had almost kissed 18 months ago. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, but she could see the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Excuse me for just a moment," she told the collector she had been speaking with, then walked over to where Damien stood studying her work. "Hello, Cassandra, Damien." His name felt strange on her lips after so long. "I wasn't sure you'd come. I saw the exhibition announcement in the Times. Your work is..." He gestured at the coral reef photograph. "It's extraordinary. You captured something magical here. I had an exceptional subject." The words carried double meaning, and they both knew it. They stood in awkward silence, surrounded by the buzz of conversation and the clink of wine glasses. Finally, Damien spoke. "I know this might sound presumptuous, but could we talk? Privately? There are things I need to tell you." Against her better judgment, Cassandra nodded. "My office is upstairs. We can use that." The elevator ride to the building's upper floors was silent, tension crackling between them like electricity. Cassandra's temporary office was sparse, just a desk, 2 chairs, and windows overlooking the city lights. She closed the door behind them and immediately regretted the intimacy of the small space. "How have you been?" Damien asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer wasn't simple. "Busy. Traveling. Building my career." She sat on the edge of the desk, maintaining distance. "And you? How's married life?" Damien's expression darkened. "That's what I need to talk to you about." He moved to the window, looking out at the city. "Victoria and we're getting divorced." The words hit Cassandra like a physical blow. "What? When?" "The papers were filed 3 months ago. It should be final by Christmas." He turned back to face her. "We've been living separate lives for over a year. She's been having an affair with someone from her father's company, and honestly, I was relieved when I found out. Damien, I'm sorry." "Don't be." He stepped closer. "It was a marriage that should never have happened. We both knew it, but we were too caught up in family expectations to admit it." Cassandra's heart was racing, but she forced herself to stay rational. "So what now? You're free, and you thought you'd look up the photographer who got away? That's not fair, isn't it?" She stood up, pacing to the other side of the small room. "Damien, you're going through a divorce. You're probably lonely, confused, looking for something familiar to hold on to. I won't be your rebound. You think that's what this is?" His voice carried an edge of anger she'd never heard before. "Cassandra, you don't understand." That morning at the train station, it wasn't just pleasant conversation for me. It was the first time in years I felt like myself. "And in Belize? In Belize, you were married to someone else. In Belize, I realized I was living a lie." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Do you know what I did that night after we almost kissed? I went back to my room and told Victoria I wanted a divorce. Cassandra's breath caught. What did she say? She said she wanted one too. She said she'd been trying to figure out how to tell me about her affair for months. Damien's laugh was bitter. We spent our honeymoon planning our divorce. Most couples plan their future. We planned our escape from each other. The revelation changed everything and nothing. Cassandra wanted to believe him, wanted to step into his arms and pick up where they had left off on that beach in Belize. But 18 months of missing him, of wondering what might have been, had left her cautious. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait until now? Because I wanted to be completely free first. No legal entanglements, no complications. He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. Because I wanted to be able to offer you everything, not just stolen moments. His touch was warm, familiar despite the time that had passed. Cassandra looked down at their joined hands and felt 18 months of careful emotional barriers begin to crumble. I need to know something, she said quietly. In Belize, if Victoria hadn't found us, what would have happened? I would have kissed you, Damien said without hesitation. I would have told you I loved you. I would have asked you to wait for me while I figured out how to untangle my life. And I would have said yes, Cassandra admitted, which terrifies me. Why? Because I've spent the last year and a half convincing myself that what I felt for you wasn't real. That it was just infatuation or loneliness or the romance of the situation. She looked up at him. But seeing you now, it's real, Damien finished. It's been real from the beginning. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. The city lights painted patterns on the office walls, and in the distance they could hear the sounds of the reception continuing downstairs. Cassandra, he whispered, I love you. I've loved you since that morning at the train station. I loved you through 18 months of a marriage that felt like an elaborate performance. I love your passion for your work. Your courage in going to the ends of the earth for the perfect shot, the way you see beauty in places other people overlook. Tears were running down her cheeks now, and she didn't care. I love you too. I've loved you through 6 continents and a dozen assignments and countless nights when I stared at hotel room ceilings wishing things were different. When he kissed her, it was with 18 months of longing and restraint finally released. It was the kiss they should have shared in Belize, soft and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. What happens now? Cassandra asked. Now we build something real, Damien said, pulling her closer. No more stolen moments, no more almosts. Just us. And whatever we want to create together. Outside the office windows, the city sparkled like a constellation fallen to earth. Below them, the gallery continued to celebrate Cassandra's captured moments of beauty from around the world. But here, in this small room overlooking the place where their story began, they were finally writing their own future, one built on truth instead of obligation, on love instead of duty, on the solid foundation of 2 hearts that had found their way home to each other. 2 years later, Cassandra stepped off the plane at JFK Airport, her camera bags heavy with memory cards full of images from the Faroe Islands. 3 weeks of documenting the remote archipelago's dramatic landscapes and resilient communities had yielded some of her best work yet. But she was exhausted in the way that only came from chasing perfect light across time zones. The terminal buzzed with typical New York energy, business people rushing to connections. Families reuniting, the constant symphony of announcements and rolling luggage. Cassandra navigated through the crowd, thinking about nothing more complex than a hot shower and her own bed, when her phone buzzed with a text. Platform 7, Track 2. Same place we started. To her heart skipped. Damien wasn't supposed to pick her up until tomorrow. They had planned a quiet evening at his apartment. Now their apartment. Though her belongings were still scattered between storage units and hotel rooms around the world, to catch up on 3 weeks apart. Curious and slightly concerned, Cassandra took the air train to Grand Central Station. The late afternoon crowd was lighter than morning rush hour, and she found herself retracing steps she had taken countless times over the past 2 years. Platform 7, Track 2 was where she had missed that train to Albany, where she had first met the man who would become the center of her world. She saw him before he saw her. Damien stood beside the same wooden bench where they had spent that first morning talking, wearing jeans and a navy sweater instead of his usual business attire. His architectural firm, now a partnership focused on sustainable housing projects, had grown significantly, but success suited him in ways his previous life never had. He looked relaxed, confident, genuinely happy in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "You're early?" Cassandra called out, setting down her bags. Damien turned, and his face lit up with the smile that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "I missed you. 3 weeks felt like 3 months." He crossed the distance between them in quick strides, lifting her off the ground in a hug that smelled like home. When he set her down, she noticed he seemed nervous, an unusual state for a man who regularly presented building designs to city planning committees. "Everything okay?" she asked, studying his face. "Everything's perfect. Better than perfect, actually." He took her hands, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers that always appeared when he was excited about something. "Cassie, I need to tell you about some things that happened while you were away. Good things or bad things?" "Incredible things." His smile grew wider. "First, remember the affordable housing project in Queens? The one the city council was dragging their feet on?" Cassandra nodded. Damien had been working for 8 months on a revolutionary design for sustainable, beautiful, low-income housing that would prove affordable didn't have to mean ugly or poorly constructed. They approved it. All of it. 40 buildings over 5 years, exactly as I proposed. Damien's eyes were bright with excitement. But here's the amazing part. They didn't just approve my designs. They specifically requested you as the project photographer. They want to document the entire process, from groundbreaking to families moving in. Cassandra stared at him. "They requested me? By name?" "By name. Apparently, your exhibition caught the attention of someone on the mayor's housing committee. They said your ability to capture the human element in architectural spaces was exactly what they needed to show the world that public housing can be beautiful, dignified, inspiring." The implications hit her all at once. This wasn't just a career opportunity. It was the chance to work alongside Damien on something meaningful, to combine their passions in service of something larger than themselves. "That's incredible," she whispered. "But Damien, I have the Antarctica assignment starting in 6 months. About that." He looked sheepish now. "I may have already called your editor and explained the situation. She's willing to move the Antarctica project to next year if you want to take this on." "You called my editor without asking me?" I know. It was presumptuous. But Cassie, this is everything we've talked about. The chance to create something together, to build something that will make a real difference in people's lives." She wanted to be annoyed at his assumption, but the excitement in his voice was infectious. For 2 years, they had supported each other's careers while building their relationship on stolen weekends and long-distance calls. The idea of working together, of creating something beautiful and meaningful as a team, was more appealing than she wanted to admit. "There's something else," Damien continued, his nervousness returning. "Something more important than any project." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Cassandra's world suddenly narrowed to just the two of them on this platform where their story had begun. "Cassandra Wells," he said, dropping to one knee right there on the concrete platform as commuters streamed around them. "I know this isn't the most romantic location, but this is where we started. This is where I first fell in love with your laugh, your passion, your way of seeing beauty in unexpected places." Tears were already starting in her eyes. Around them, people were stopping, pulling out phones, smiling at the impromptu proposal happening in one of the world's busiest train stations. "I spent 34 years living other people's dreams before I met you," Damien continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You taught me what it meant to choose my own path, to build something real instead of just existing in structures other people designed for me." He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike anything Cassandra had ever seen. Instead of a traditional diamond solitaire, it featured a central stone surrounded by smaller gems arranged in a pattern that looked like... "Is that a camera aperture?" she gasped. Damien grinned. "I designed it myself. The center stone represents us, and the smaller diamonds are set in f-stops. f1.4, f2.8, f4, f5.6. All the settings that capture perfect light. It was so perfectly them, so thoughtful and unique that Cassandra started laughing through her tears. "Cassandra," Damien said, his voice soft but carrying clearly despite the noise around them. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Will you be my partner in love, in work, in chasing perfect light and creating beautiful spaces and making the world a little better than we found it?" The platform around them had grown quiet, dozens of strangers waiting for her answer. But Cassandra was only aware of Damien's green eyes, the hope and love and nervous excitement written across his face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." The platform erupted in applause as Damien stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the light from the station's overhead fixtures like a tiny constellation on her hand. When he kissed her, it tasted like promises and new beginnings, and the kind of happiness that builds slowly and lasts forever. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," she replied. "Even if you did call my editor without permission, I'll make it up to you. We have 5 years of building projects to work on together. You can boss me around on every single one." Cassandra laughed, looking down at her ring and then back at the man who had just rearranged her entire future with a simple question. 5 years of projects, and then what?" "Then we'll find new dreams to chase," Damien said, pulling her close as the crowd began to disperse and normal station life resumed around them. "We'll travel to places you want to photograph. We'll design buildings that change how people think about their environments. We'll create something beautiful together." As they gathered her bags and headed toward the exit, Cassandra marveled at how different this moment felt from that morning 3 years ago when she had missed her train and met a stranger. Then she had been rushing toward someone else's celebration. Now she was walking toward her own future with the person who had taught her that the best adventures weren't the ones you planned, but the ones that found you when you were brave enough to say yes to unexpected connections. Outside Grand Central, the city sparkled in the late afternoon light. Somewhere across town, her sister Elena was probably putting her own children to bed, living the happy ending Cassandra had once photographed. Somewhere else, other couples were falling in love, getting engaged, building lives together. But here, on the sidewalk where yellow taxis painted streaks of light against the urban landscape, Cassandra Chen Wells looked at her new fiancé and knew that her own love story, complicated, delayed, worth waiting for, was just beginning. The ring on her finger caught the last rays of sunshine, and she thought about all the perfect shots she had captured around the world. But this moment, this ordinary New York evening with the man she loved, was the most beautiful light she had ever seen. "Ready to go home?" Damien asked, hailing a taxi. "With you?" Cassandra smiled, her camera bag heavy with memories from the past, her heart light with dreams for the future. "I've been ready since the day we met.